Wilf Zaha. You've got a soft spot for him, haven't you? He's one of your own. He came through your academy at Crystal Palace. Yeah. And to be quite honest, you find it hard to say anything
not true
of any critical nature towards Wilf Zaha.
Not true.
Oh, yesterday you were singing his praises.
I've said on many occasions I'd like to see Wilf Zaha spending less time with his hands on his hips, rolling around on the floor and getting himself involved in the game. And I've noticed a change in his game since Patrick Vieira came in, and there's more involvement and there's more contribution. I've also said he doesn't score enough goals. So I do criticise Wilf, but I think he's a remarkable talent.
Okay, that said, the same Wilfred Zaha in the newspapers this morning, such as the Mail, Zaha offered £320,000 a week by the Saudis. So if it's good for Ronaldo, it's good for Wilf Zaha. Although Ronaldo, you can put a few more zeros on his wage packet. Zaha has a 320 grand a week offer on the table, reportedly, from the Saudi Arabian side Al Ittihad. It's come his way. He's out of contract in the summer. There is interest in Europe, reportedly from AC Milan. That's by the by, though, because this is mind-blowing money that Zaha, for one, might find it too difficult to turn down. But would his credibility, Simon, as a footballer not be shot to pieces if he takes a big money move to Saudi Arabia now, this summer, at the age of 30?
Well, okay. In whose eyes?
In the eyes of English football fans, in the eyes of Palace fans, of course, especially, but in the eyes of English football fans specifically.
If Crystal Palace fans have any issue with Wilfred Zaha applying his trade somewhere else and choosing where he wants to do that, then they'd be slightly unfair and deluded, because the one thing they cannot argue about is that Wilfred Zaha has put a shift in for Crystal Palace on the whole for the majority of the time.
That's the least he can do, though, isn't it?
It is the least he can do.
You would say that.
It is the least he can do, but notwithstanding that, you can't criticise and not praise in equal measure. A lot of players don't do that. A lot of players would be first ones to get out the door if they possibly could. Wilf went to Man United, came back from Man United, got Palace promoted to the Premier League, and often has been the main reason why Crystal Palace have been able to compete in games.
Really? The main reason?
Well, until recently.
The main reason?
Hang on, I'll qualify it. Until recently, there was a statistic, that Crystal Palace very rarely won a game without Wilfred Zaha being in the team. Now, thank God that statistic has been now rescinded by the inclusion of people like Eze in the side and the next generation of players that are coming through to pick up the mantle that Wilfred Zaha has done for Crystal Palace. I think Wilfred Zaha has had a career that could have gone far bigger and far better. I think the move to Man United was in part his own fault, but also a change of ownership change of management at Man United.
And he was too young.
Well, no. Wayne Rooney wasn't too young when he went to Manchester United. It's not about age, it's about how you're prepared for it. And Wilfred Zaha wasn't ready for Man United. Man United was in a state of flux, so he has to own that himself. He came back to Crystal Palace. Most of the time, for Crystal Palace, he's been a revelation. Sometimes he's been a disappointment. But I think most Palace fans, if you were to ask them and do a vox pop on Palace fans what they thought about Wilfred Zaha leaving and going wherever he chose to in the world, they wouldn't begrudge him it. Now, moving to the mainstream media, whose relevance about Wilfred Zaha's career is probably academic, because he's already changed his direction of playing for England and moved to Ivory Coast. If it prejudices his opportunity to play for Ivory Coast, then that may be one discussion. But ultimately, if the money that's being offered, which we have to look at and say this can't be good for the game.
No.
It can't be good. This Middle Eastern money has got to be brought into line to some extent. There's got to be some general governance through FIFA and around the world federations to stop this, because it's beginning to unwind sport. You can't get boxing matches made because they've got ideas that they're going to get paid in Saudi Arabia 150 million quid, so it causes fights in this country to be conflicted. You've now got players being dragged across into other countries for ridiculous amounts of money, which then pollutes the whole ecosystem. There's something very unedifying about it. But going to your original question, I'd like to think Wilfred Zaha's on £6.5 million a year at Palace. He's on a lot of money. He's already accumulated a significant amount of money. The challenge for me now is that Wilfred Zaha hasn't put himself in the way of a big challenge in football for 8 or 9 years. But the reasons why is because Crystal Palace were not prepared to let Arsenal walk in the door and pay 30 million quid for a player that was worth twice that amount in comparison to others. So he's been slightly stymied in that opportunity because people don't buy footballers from Crystal Palace for 60 million quid for some reason or another.
Is it not? The thought of many is, and to a degree I include myself in this, he spends too much time writhing about in the ground.
Well, I said that, didn't I?
Too much time protesting to the referee about the mishandling he's getting from opposition defenders. They don't. Not all of them, Simon. They all don't do that. Why is there not a queue of Premier League clubs knocking on Palace's door saying, we want your man Zaha?
Because Palace, this is not an inferiority complex, having been involved with Palace and watching Palace as a vested interest.
There's something about Zaha that you protect.
Because I know how good he is.
Defend.
Ask the football people, and Souness made a bad opinion about Casemiro, but ask people what they think of Zaha. They know he's a good player.
Has he fulfilled his potential at the age of 30 in English football?
Well, if you're a Crystal Palace fan, some would say yes. If you're a fan of
Simon, how can you say that?
Well, I can say it because if you're a Crystal Palace fan, he's delivered an outcome for Crystal Palace that during the bulk of his time at Crystal Palace has held them in a situation where offensively he's been their one option. Not in goals, but in terms of actual danger. I do agree. But they're all doing it. Wilfred, Alice Band wearing Jack Grealish spends more time rolling around the floor. They're all doing it. I'm in the same camp as you. That sometimes I think Wilf's got a little bit too much of it. I would rather him do things in a certain way.
The difference is Manchester City were prepared to pay 100 million for Jack Grealish.
And there it is. Because
and that's the nub of it.
But yes, but also,
nobody's prepared to come in and take a risk on Zaha.
No, but Man United
have you got it to do it at the highest level?
But Arsenal. Everybody knows that Arsenal wanted Zaha in 2019. Everybody knows it, but they were not going to pay what Palace wanted. Palace said, "Well, we're not selling him to you for 30 million quid." No, thank you very much. You don't get to do what you've done to us previously when you bought Ian Wright off us and people like that. You don't get to do that. You get to pay the market price.
If Arsenal really wanted Zaha, they would have paid it.
Well, Arsenal at that time...
They paid 72 million for Pepe.
Yes, and why? Because they paid it over 5 or 6 years. They got it on the drip. That's why they bought Pepe. And how did that work out for them?
This is the only option now that's left for Zaha, is it not, in terms of big earnings?
No. It's a free transfer.
Until he goes.
No. It's a free transfer. So in the event that he doesn't sign for Palace, which I don't expect him to do, there's going to be an embarrassment of riches because they're going to take a punt on Zaha because it's going to cost them nothing from a capital outlay. Zaha can rock in the door and say, right, I want £200,000 a week in English football and I want to play for XYZ club and I'm a free transfer. Within reason, there's going to be a bunch of football clubs that would look at it and say, that's an educated punt. Now, whether
you were top of the queue when you battered Gareth Bale for going to LAFC. That's it. But good riddance to you because you're out there just to make some dough in the twilight of your career. Not that Gareth needed it, nor does Zaha.
No, I didn't.
But that's what Wilf's doing here.
Now, hold on. Let's characterise that properly. What I said was, if you're going to prepare for a World Cup for your nation and the hopes of the country are landing on your shoulders, what are you doing going playing in some half-baked football in America rather than playing in competitive football and being available to play in a competitive fashion? And so it proved to be. And we also got the backdrop of Gareth Bale where we see this situation where there is a scenario where his game time has been limited by his fallout with Real Madrid, and I think he's wasted some of his talent. Now, I'm not going to put Wilfred Zaha in the same breath as Gareth Bale's achievements. Gareth Bale has won the Champions League 2 or 3 times. So but I do think Wilfred Zaha could have played for Real Madrid. He's that good.
Could have.
He's that good.
Could have.
Yeah, could have.
Could have, would have, should have.
Who guided his career? Maybe if he had some ghastly individual like Kia Jaraption rolling around, pushing him everywhere, then maybe he'd get better opportunities.
So where's his credibility if he disappears off to the dunes in the desert?
In the eyes of whom?
In the eyes of everybody, in the perception of everybody who observes the English game.
You mean everybody?
What does it tell you that I'm off to the desert because they're offering me $320,000 a week?
Yes, you mean in the eyes of everybody that's not particularly relevant. Wilfred Zaha, I don't think should go to Saudi. I don't. I think I'd much prefer him operating at the highest level because I know he's good enough. If he chooses at this stage in his career, at 30, 31 years of age, to run after 15 million quid when he can probably get 7 or 8
he can't be blamed for that, I agree.
People got to be commercially viable about it. But notwithstanding that, if Wilfred Zaha is happy with his career, who are you? Who are I? And who are all of these know-nothings about what Wilfred Zaha's worldview is to tell him what he should and shouldn't do? If it stops him playing from Ivory Coast...
You give this guy a pass for some reason. I don't know why. It's because of your Palace connection.
No, I give him a pass because I think in this instance he's got a right to make a decision. The bottom line is that what about Oscar? When Oscar slung his hook out of Chelsea to go and play in the...
If Gareth Bale had gone to Al Ittihad or whoever they are, you would have said, nah, I'm not having that. What's he doing going out there other than for a huge bag of money?
I couldn't give a monkey's where Gareth Bale goes, but only in the context of a question about what Gareth Bale's contribution to the World Cup was going to be for the Welsh. I couldn't give a monkey's about how the Welsh got on in the World Cup, quite frankly. You know, but the bottom line is
That's why that Welsh guy had a mouthful at you.
Well, absolutely, and that's why I clean my shoes with a Welsh shirt, and how Robson-Kanu got all upset about it. But that's a different discussion. The comparison for Wilfred Zaha and Gareth Bale is one thing, but don't be under any illusion that Wilfred Zaha is not a top footballer.
Let's hear from Palace fans on him. Where's your head regards Wilf Zaha now when we hear this, that he could well be heading to Saudi Arabia to join Ronaldo and et al. Out there? 320 grand a week. Yeah, hard to turn down. But what does it tell us about his credibility as a footballer? Is it not going to be shot to pieces if he takes his big money move to Saudi at the age of 30?
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.